Hello everybody, I am PhenomSage, and welcome back to another Darling in the Franxx episode review. Today we are going to be talking about episode 2, What It Means to Connect. And yes, I just could not stay away from this series. I'm pretty sure I blatantly made it clear that I would be reviewing this series for the remainder of its run, just because that first episode grabbed me so much, and I saw so much potential in where this plot and where these characters could go. And I really need to learn to trust my instincts a little bit more, because this second episode, just gave me so much to talk about, so much to work with. I think this is the single most amount of notes that I've written for a standard length episode. There is a ton to analyze and speculate and just comment on in general in terms of this episode, the events that take place, and how well it executes them. This episode definitely didn't reach the same action climaxes that we reached in that first episode, and frankly I wasn't expecting it to, but what it offers in that place is just more interesting character dynamics and a deeper look into some of these personalities. And there was just so much to absorb in this episode that I actually had to watch it 3 times just to get all the notes that I wanted to make about just every little thing. And there are some very tiny scenes and tiny moments that do elaborate on this world and the characters. And watching it that many times made me really appreciate some aspects of the episode that I didn't care for as much the first time around. So let's just get into the main focal point, and I've already seen it everywhere on social media, and I know that it's going to be exactly what people are focusing on for this episode. Last week, a lot of people were speculating that this series could and probably would start delving into these more sexual and intimate themes. And I wasn't so sure about that at first. I didn't necessarily want to just write off the 02 scene in the lake as just, oh, okay, so this series is going to be so sexually charged, and it's going to be fan service galore, and it's going to be stupid. And I initially denied that speculation just because it didn't seem like it was going to be that kind of series. But after this episode, it is incredibly clear, blatantly clear, that that is exactly what this series is going for. That is what the writers are going for. And in short, you should expect a lot more of this in the future. And when I initially heard those claims and that speculation, I wanted to write it off because I didn't like that idea. I didn't like the idea of what appeared to me as a grounded series going in that direction and potentially muddying this emotional connection that I want to feel with these characters. And this is one of the aspects that after rewatching multiple times, I really grew to appreciate the way that they handled it throughout this episode. Because there's no denying it, the innuendos and euphemisms and just everything sexually related in this story is explored to an insane degree, more than I think we've ever seen Trigger explore before, and these are the people that gave us Kill La Kill. And I know right from the jump that this is going to be incredibly controversial. I know that some people are going to hate it. I know that some people are going to write this entire series off because of the way that they're handling the sexual themes of this story. But I really grew to appreciate the way that this episode handled those themes on rewatch, and even the first time I viewed the episode, I did enjoy how it was handled, but I just enjoyed it even more as I was rewatching, because this episode does shift tones in a way where the sexual elements feel natural to a story like this for me. It didn't feel out of place. I don't really know how else to describe it other than it just vibed with these characters and the overall narrative that I'm seeing. And that's not necessarily to say that the story has gone completely silly or stupid and that's why the fan service is working. In fact, we have an incredibly emotional sequence regarding some of our characters that specifically involves this sexual tension and theme. So I guess the way that this story is focusing on these elements makes it so it just feels completely natural to me. So yeah, I'm just gonna come right out and say it. I enjoyed the way that they handled those elements in this episode. Do I understand why some other people wouldn't like it? Completely, I get it. I feel like this will be a very divisive series because of these aspects. And in all fairness, some of it does come across a little bit too on the nose and heavy-handed at times, but I'm hoping that's clearly because they are setting up delving into these themes a lot more as the series continues and potentially doing really interesting and unique things with it. And these sexual themes are most prominently shown through these mechs themselves. I have been cleared up on the terminology and can now more properly explain what's going on here. The male pilots are referred to as stamens, and inside these FranXX, they take control of the female pilots, who who are known as pistols. Now, right from the images that I'm putting on screen, I think you can tell where these more sexually charged themes and scenes are coming from. Now, just from the terminology pistols and stamen, you can see what they're going for. They're trying to mirror flower reproduction in these mechs, and I'm not sure how big of a role this flower symbolism will have in the overall plot, but it's a unique spin on having our two pilots connected together, and I enjoy that aspect as well. We learn that it's less cooperative and more that the stamen takes over the pistol and is the one controlling the mech through this mind connection. Now again, right from the jump, I can say that this is going to be incredibly controversial, and I fully expect to see a lot of articles complaining about this. To further expand on this concept of these two pilots connecting and taking control of this mech, this could have been easily assumed without saying anything, but we get more details into the way this works, and we learn that the sync between these two pilots is what determines how well they can control it, and that sync is determined by their emotional connection and how much they trust each other. We see multiple times throughout this episode of mechs not working because their pilots are out of sync. So that does raise the question on how Hiro and Zero 2 were piloting that FranXX in episode 1 so well when Hiro just met her and yet can't do it with Ichigo in this episode, despite assumedly being childhood friends. Obviously there's more going on to both Hiro and Zero 2, but I wonder how that affects the bond and the trust between the two of them. Let's talk about characters, because last episode I mentioned and fully endorsed these characters as being people I see a lot of potential in. None of them really came across as archetypes to me, and I know you can look at their appearance and say something like, oh, the fatty's eating bread, stereotype, stereotype. That is not indicative to his personality, that just means he likes eating. We still have no idea what his personality is, other than he has the most wholesome relationship in this entire group. The character I want to focus on the most, of course being the one who got the most focus in this episode, is Ichigo. Now, I loved her from episode 1. Everybody was screaming 02, and I was the only one in that little camp saying Ichigo best girl. And now she gets her focus, she gets her spotlight. And from this episode, she is easily the most compelling character out of the bunch. It was hinted at multiple times during episode 1 that she liked Hiro to some capacity, and that is just further expanded on in this episode and becomes the driving force to what I would call the climax of this episode, when Hiro and Ichigo pilot a mech together and inevitably fail. Now, this is just such a powerful way to end the episode, for a multitude of reasons, including Hiro's character as well, but I will get into that later. But what I appreciated most about Ichigo's character is just this passionate desire to not only help Hiro prove himself, but I think deep down that she wanted him to realize that he connects to her as well. And by the end of the episode, when we see that her efforts were completely in vain, and she is just beyond upset that Hiro did not connect with her even after they kissed, and yet can connect to this random girl that he just met, that final line of the episode, when she's trying to reassure him saying, you don't have to apologize, don't worry, and then she just mutters under her breath, you were awful, it just really resonates with me. And there are so many ways to interpret what she means by this, and I'd love to hear what you guys think she meant by this. Honestly, I don't really have a concrete answer for what she meant when she said that, but it's clear that she said that entirely through her hurt feelings, and that's why it's so powerful. She's crying, she wants to make this work, but she can't. And this is probably the scene that I have to praise the most in this episode. They just do such a good job of conveying the emotions and the thoughts of our characters. We feel that frustration and we feel that pain from both of them, and I feel like a lot of people will be focusing on Ichigo's role in all of this, when Hiro has just as compelling thoughts and emotions regarding this entire situation and how he failed. We have to remember that this is the second time that he has failed syncing with another partner that we know of. He might have failed even more in the past. And when you see that hopelessness on his face and see him apologizing, you can just sense how ashamed he is that he isn't able to sync with anybody. He's also probably thinking about how he failed Naomi and how he's basically the reason why she was shipped off. And when you look at it like that, Naomi really did get shafted. Like, she got sent out because she was partnered with somebody who just isn't compatible with anybody. So yeah, I thought they did a great job of humanizing Hiro and Ichigo in this sequence, and it's scenes like this that just make me so confused when I hear people say that Hiro is generic or boring. He definitely doesn't have the presence or charisma of somebody like Zero 2, but I don't think at all that that makes him a generic character. I just think that makes him somebody who has potential to grow. A question I want to pose to you guys is, why do you think Hiro isn't able to sync up with anybody except Zero 2? We learned in this episode that Hiro is a rare sample that doesn't physically age. But why does this prevent him from connecting with any of his partners? Is it only because he likes being dominated by horned pink-haired girls? Or is there something more to it? This also connects with the piece of information that we learn about how Zero 2 actually has the ability to pilot alone, most likely due to her Klaxosaur blood. So is that why the two of them mix together? Does Hiro also have the blood of a Klaxosaur or have some kind of connection to the Klaxosaurs? Again, it's speculation like this that makes reviewing series like this so much fun. In fact, on that note, there were several interesting theories on the Discord about this Hiro and Zero 2 connection, bringing up the fact that we did not see Hiro and Zero 2 pilot the FranXX. We saw it from outside, but we did not see how it was going on the inside. And due to the fact that Hiro doesn't remember this either, I have a feeling that it will be a revelation in the future on how Hiro is able to connect to Zero 2. Probably the most interesting theory I saw was that Hiro was in the female slot and Zero 2 was in the stamen slot, and it's reversed. So essentially Hiro is a submissive who only works when he's being dominated. And I like this theory a lot, and it does fit in with one of the first key arts we got for the series, where it shows Zero 2 in the driver's seat or the stamen seat. I also saw another theory that instead of the pistol, who generally gives up control to the stamen, Zero 2 shares the responsibility of the stamen, and it's both her and Hiro that are controlling the mech. And I feel like this fits right in with the bird metaphor of the first episode, saying that they're both just halves of one whole. So both of those theories make complete sense to me, and I could see either or of them being true. Speaking of characters, let's get on the flip side of where I stand on these characters, because I started out with my favorite aspect and my favorite character of the episode, Ichigo, extending to Hiro, and how compelling I think those two characters can be. Let's talk about a character I don't like, who I think actually detracted from the episode, and I really hope gets some kind of development or redemption in the future, and that is the character known as Zorro. Out of the characters that we've focused on so far, I would say he is the only unlikable character, and one of the few complaints that I have with this episode. He just comes across so comically douchey compared to how mellow everyone else is, and I was not getting that impression from him in the first episode, and it's a shame that he turned out to be that kind of character, because it just really does not mesh with the other cast for me personally. I feel like you can make him out to be this dickish character, just tone it down a bit. He's so unnecessarily mean. Those are my least favorite kinds of characters, and I really hope that Zorro does receive some kind of arc or redemption in the future. I feel like he has to. I feel like you don't set up a character like this without planning to give him some kind of redemption in the future. To elaborate a little bit more on the characters that I did like, I do want to talk about Best Boy Goro, and how despite not receiving a lot of screen time in this episode, really left an impression on me. Out of the cast last episode, I thought that he would be the douchey one, and he ended up being the most chill and nice dude out of the entire cast. Especially being Ichigo's partner, I thought that for sure drama was incoming when Hiro and Ichigo started to team up and pilot the mech. I thought he was going to cause some fit, say that he's already partnered with Ichigo, why are you doing this? But no, the dude is completely supportive and chill about it. I love this man. This is best boy right here. So I'm happy that he subverted my expectations regarding what his character would be. And again, it's another one of those things where I said last episode, these character designs do not indicate what kind of personality these characters have. These do not feel like archetypical characters to me. And finally, everybody's done it already, but I do want to gush about Zero 2 a little bit and say that she is just unbelievably charismatic and entertaining entertaining to watch. She's the selling point for a lot of people on this show, and while I don't know if I love her to that degree where I'd say that she's the selling point, she is definitely up there with Ichigo as my favorite character to watch and see what they do. The dining hall scene especially, I just love how unabashedly she shows her affection for Hiro. She's like sitting on his lap, feeding him food. It's so funny and refreshing to see a character who can express their emotions for somebody with no hesitation. You don't see that very often in anime. Now let's get into the theory crafting, speculation, and just tiny little world building bits of information that were sprinkled throughout this episode that I feel like could have major implications on the future of this series. The first point I want to focus on is this brief bit of dialogue that we get in the dining hall saying that there are no single digit numbers that exist in this FranXX program. A commenter was speculating this last episode, and I didn't even register this, but it seems like the lower number you have, the more important you are to this program. 02, of course, being their prime focus, and Hiro only at number 16, still being a very rare sample who does not physically age. And when this was made aware to me, my mind immediately jumped to, what is 01? Who is that? Where are they? And now the fact that we know that no single digit numbers exist at all, I wonder if these characters will come up in the future. In the opening, we do see a group of people. I don't know if that's going to be the single digit group, but I do think it's possible. And I know for a fact, if we don't get all of the single digit numbers, I know for a fact that 01 will be a plot point in the future. Who is 01? Who is the first member of this FranXX program? And if we don't see the other single digit numbers, where are they? Are they dead? How did they die? Like I said, there's just so much potential on where they can take this story and all of these different little elements that add up into this really interesting world for me. Another brief bit of information that we got regarding our caretaker Nana is that she was also this group's caretaker in some place called the Garden. Again, another little world building tidbit that elaborates a bit more on what the process of getting these FranXX candidates is. I'm going to assume that the Garden is kind of like elementary middle school where you're raising these children, and then the parasites are what they become when they graduate from the Garden. Now, there is a lot of questions regarding this Garden, especially when you get our first glimpse into where I assume the residents of this society live. This underground city, which I think is under the plantation. Or maybe this is the plantation. What I want to know is how this society picks who stays in this city as a resident and who goes up to join the FranXX program. How are children taken from this society and brought to this garden? How do they choose that? I do have a theory that only adults live in this underground city, and that the FranXX program is exclusive to teenagers due to their pubescence and their sexual drive that they're feeling as teenagers. I think that is what they're going for when they're powering these mechs, is that they're using that sexual energy. Like, that's what allows these two pilots to sync so well, is the sexual connection between the two. And maybe I'm just reading too much into that, but I feel like that is a prime possibility. And maybe when you grow out of that and can't connect with a pilot anymore, you become an adult and go to live in this underground city. Again, I love how subtly this world is being built around these children. We're not given any of the answers straight out. Instead, we're given a bunch of brief glimpses and brief dialogue, little hints that we can string together and slowly start to understand how this world functions. Those are my favorite kinds of worlds. I think that's the best way to handle world building and indirect expositional dialogue as well. It's just really natural and it really immerses me into the world, and I'm glad that that's the approach that they're taking in this beginning, at least. I don't know if they're going to start doing that later on. I hope not, because I really enjoy this approach. One thing that was glossed over a bit, but I'm glad ended up happening, is that we learned Naomi from last episode, the girl in the pod who was sent away, is still alive even after her pod was crushed. Don't even ask me how that's possible. I'm not sure how she's alive, but apparently she is in the hospital, her injuries are being treated, and all is well with that character. A lot of people speculated that there was some kind of ulterior thing going on with that character, me included. I thought these pods were taking them off somewhere to be experimented on or maybe killed off because they didn't live up to these FranXX standards. They couldn't operate them, so they're useless to this society. But no, she's well and fine and she's in the hospital. Now you could argue that they're lying to them and that there is some kind of ulterior motive regarding what they're doing to the children that are being sent out on pods, but I would argue if that was the case, I don't see why they would even tell the children that she's in the hospital in the first place. They could easily just say, oh, nope, she died, and continue doing whatever they were doing with her. So I doubt that that's the case, but it does make me wonder where she was being sent off to in the first place. She clearly felt like she didn't need any of her personal belongings, so that made me assume, oh no, is she going to get killed off? And it makes me wonder, is she being sent to this underground city? I really couldn't tell you, and I think that will be a major plot point in the future, is finding out where these children on pods end up going. The final piece of world building I'd like to focus on right now is probably the most interesting to me in terms of where this series could go and the way that this society functions, and that is the brief look that we get into this APE Central Headquarters Council, as we see this group known as the Lamarck Club circled around almost like a committee who I assume are in charge of this entire community. And I do wonder what kind of characters these guys will be, including Papa himself. You would immediately assume that these will be the antagonists of this story, because I do get villain vibes, but at the same time there's nothing in this conversation that really feels antagonistic. The only thing they're saying is that they don't want 02's blood tainted by anybody else's, which I would argue, if that's the case, why were you letting her pilot with other regular humans in the first place? But whatever. So I hope that this council will have an integral role and are just cool characters in general, because just from this brief appearance alone, I definitely like the way that they look, and I'm completely cool with this being our main enemy. To bounce off of that though, I do want to get into this headquarters itself. What is this thing? What is this vessel that they're in? We get a brief shot that makes it look almost like a UFO, and that makes me wonder if it's flying. Is this a flying vessel that goes from plantation to plantation to stock up on fuel? And if so, what is the purpose of always flying? Is it just so that they're not attacked by the Klaxosaurs? Because that makes sense to me. We also learn that this thing is powered by magma, which is not a very commonly used fuel source, and it makes me wonder what kind of planet we're living on right now that they're harvesting magma for their source of fuel. Is this a post-apocalyptic world where the entire planet is just supported by magma, or what? I don't know, man. There's just so much world building here. There's so much interesting things to speculate on, and I'm just really excited to learn more. One final note I'd like to make before we end this episode off, more on the technical side. I've already praised the animation so much I didn't feel like I had to do it again, but I do want to make a note that while there weren't many action sequences that really pushed the boundaries and showed this studio's animation at its finest, the dialogue and the character animation is still just as good as ever. It is so well done, and specifically in the climactic scenes where we get this emotion and having those facial expressions is really important. They really deliver and convey all of the emotions of our characters, and that's why I like these designs so much. I'm loving them more and more every time I see them, because you initially write them off as just these generic A1 designs, but the things that they're doing with them in the animation is so well done. They're practically blank slates that you can put any expression on and just make it so expressive. It's why simple character designs just work so well, because it leaves them open to just a wide array of possibilities in terms of what you can do with their expressions and their character acting. So yeah, props to A1, props to Trigger. It is just a fantastic production so far, and I'm really looking forward to seeing more of this animation in the future. But that's been all from me. Thank you guys so much for watching this Darling in the FranXX episode review. I haven't edited this down yet, but I have a feeling that this review will be longer than usual, and it's just purely because there is so much to talk about in this series, and I just hope it continues being like this, where I just have so much to talk about, so much I want to say about everything that's going on. So yeah, sorry if this is on the longer side, but there was just too much for me to talk about, and I wasn't going to cut out things just to keep the length down. But yeah, as always, I really appreciate you guys watching. Thank you for liking the video, commenting your thoughts, just everything. I really appreciate it. It makes watching these series week by week that much more fun. And speaking of talking to you guys, if you want a place to chat with me or this community just whenever without having to comment on my videos, I highly recommend joining the Discord. It is the best place to contact me. Just chill out, chat with me about whatever you feel like, as well as the rest of the community that has gone on there as well. It's just a really fun time. So if that sounds like something you're interested in, I recommend checking that out. A link will be in the description. But of course, as usual, have a great day.